Why? And welcome back. This is Difficult Conversations, Season 2, Episode 2. And we're doing something a little different this time this season. We're going to have what we call monthly meetups, where we're going to bring back two of everybody's favorite guests. We're going to bring back Dr. Obed Magny and Mike Powell. So first, without further ado, I'm going to bring on Mike Powell. Mike has been working on some pet projects. So Mike's going to come on, and he's going to tell you a little bit about what he's got going on. Hey, Mike, how you doing tonight?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me back, Dean. It's always a pleasure to be here. And as you can see, I'm sporting my new shirt. Proud to represent it.
You look amazing, as always. You look fantastic, Mike. So, we were talking backstage for a little bit. You said that you have a pet project, something that you're looking to launch. Tell everybody about what you got going on.
Yeah, it's something kind of similar to what you're doing, Dean, in regards to just advocacy in regards to some of the issues that are going on in the world today as it relates to just a general understanding of laws and, trying to build a better relationship between law enforcement and the community. And I think, I like your slogan. It's supply the why, because a lot of times what happens is people have issues with things until you actually, supply the why, until you explain why we do things the way we do. It gives the general public a better idea about what we do and how we do it. So, like your project, mine has similar roles. It's called Warriors to Guardians, and it means several things. It means, for me, is I was a veteran, so you have that warrior mentality. When I served in the military, so coming to law enforcement, things are changing in society. So you have to take that warrior mentality and transition that to a guardian mentality. Hence why my project is called Warriors to Guardians.
That's amazing. Now, how can we find you? If people are interested in your project, what are the ways that we can kind of follow you and just keep track of your progress?
I periodically I'll post things out. I may post some things to my page. It's kind of new. I'm just starting to get into it again. Like I said, it's kind of fresh. So I'm just trying to figure out the best way of providing the best tools for advocacy for public consumption. So Facebook is probably the best thing right now.
All right. So what is your Facebook page again?
Warriors to Guardians. So Warriors to the number 2 Guardians.
Outstanding. All right. So if you're out there and you like what Mike has to say, please hit him up. Warriors to Guardians. All right. Our next guest needs no introduction. He's one of everybody's favorites. Please welcome back Dr. Obed Magny.
My man.
How you guys doing? And bravo to you. And bravo to you, Mr. Powell, on your now future endeavors, I guess you could call it.
Yeah,
I think that's great.
Thank you.
Warriors to Guardians. Yes, Guardians. It's Monday. Forgive me. It's late here on the West Coast. So
you're a healthy guy. You think about all those veggies you eat. So that's why you're talking about. Yeah. That's what it is.
I'm a little tipsy off the tofu. That's what that is right now.
So Obed, I see that you're sporting a new shirt. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you got going on?
So first and foremost, I'm here representing Supply the Y2. All right, where's my shirt? All right. I don't want your audience members thinking I'm leaving you hanging. So I'm here representing y'all. So the M, obviously, this is my logo, Magny Leadership. How you doing, young Jenkins? How you doing? She's like, stop talking to me.
This is Dylan.
How you doing, Dylan? Dylan's gonna be the new star, the future host of the show. So this is Magny Leadership. That's it's a business that I'm running, consulting business. We need transformational leadership in policing, and the goal of my organization, or I guess say my business, is to bring that transformative leadership to the profession so that it works for everyone, the police and for our citizens in many, many communities. So we use emotional intelligence training, other leadership types of training. So that's just a little bit of what I'm doing. For some who do not know, I just came back from Dallas last weekend because of a walk that I did with two of my colleagues, Tarek McGuire and Sean Barnes, where we walked from Selma to Montgomery, 54 miles, to bring awareness and raise the consciousness of community police relations, as we all know, is super frail during these times, during these tumultuous times. So one of the things that I'm doing, my 54th mile, is to help community police relations using this vehicle, Magny Leadership, to help bring us all together, because Lord knows we need that more than anything else right now. So that's just a little bit about me.
I love it, man. You're always hustling, you're always grinding, and you're motivating others. So again, I'm a little jealous. Maybe I should have went with the collared shirt. You know that you are a doctor, so you look
in the interest of transparency and disclosure. So I don't know my own strength. You could probably see I knocked off one of my buttons. So when I was putting this on, so I'm over here rocking trying to close this button here, and it ain't working. So I'm a hot mess tonight. So I'm off on the wrong foot. So just put it on.
Well, Dean, it's more in line with his title too. I mean, he is a doctor, so he needs the collared shirt.
Yeah, well, just trying.
We're not going to let you away with that, Obed. You know that we're going to be on you for the entire show. So with that said, let's break away from that. And what I've been doing, gentlemen, is I usually find a video that I think kind of kicks us off in the right direction. So why don't we take a look at this? Give me a second. I am going to fast forward. It's a blonde video. I'm going to fast forward to the part that I think is the most relevant, and then we'll have a quick discussion, and off we'll go from there. All right, so stand by, fellas.
Fantastic.
Six months after 26.
Now leading up through Breonna Taylor and others. And so this is going to have to keep going. Missing one game, missing a couple of games is not going to change anything dramatic necessarily.
Right.
The pursuit of it has got to be dogged and determined.
This particular, and I'm going to touch on this tomorrow and beyond, please don't get me wrong, but I want to move this conversation forward in this regard because we've seen so many protests, we've seen players, really, really expressing themselves for all the right reasons. But it comes down to, what are you going to do about it? What are you really, really after? Because that's what a lot of people in our society are asking. Now, this particular case in the state of Kentucky, it has, what is it called? No-knock warrants. OK, now that's not applicable to this case because the attorney general said that this didn't involve a no-knock warrant. But it's interesting. Do you know that no-knock warrants, obviously that exists in Kentucky? So does a license to carry. So does stand your ground laws, a la Trayvon Martin from years ago. So if you can execute a no-knock warrant in a state, and that same state there's a license to carry, and that same state there's stand your ground laws, that's a powder keg waiting to happen between citizens and law enforcement officials. Maybe, just maybe, if.
All right. So we won't get into the, I don't necessarily want to get into the politics of what NBA players and NFL players should or should not be doing. That's a different show for a different time. But what I did think was positive was I did enjoy the whole, the powder keg analogy that he used, when he talked about that when you have these different things. Excuse me 1 second, gentlemen. There we go. So when you have all these different elements together, where you have a stand your ground rule or law, you have a license to carry where you can be licensed to carry, and then you couple that with no-knock warrants, something like this might have been bound to happen. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Mike first. Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about what is a no-knock warrant? Because a lot of people don't really understand what it is and what the process is for obtaining one and why they have a purpose. So go ahead. The floor is yours.
Yeah. So here in Massachusetts, a no-knock warrant. So you have two types of search warrants, generally speaking. Is you have your routine warrant, search warrant, which requires us in Massachusetts, as far as law enforcement, it requires us in Massachusetts to knock and announce before we enter a home on a routine search warrant. However, there's also something called a no-knock warrant. And a no-knock warrant in Massachusetts, there's several layers of oversight with a no-knock warrant in Massachusetts. So it's not just given to you willy-nilly. So first of all, if you have a no-knock warrant, that means there's a heightened level of concern in regards to the location you're trying to enter. And when I say a heightened concern, it's in regards to safety, the escape of the person being sought, or the destruction of evidence. So to get a no-knock warrant, you're going to have to hit one of those three things. And it's based upon, you have to have a probable cause to believe that there's a safety issue, that the escape of an individual is imminent, or the destruction of property. That's going to trigger the no-knock search warrant. And again, there's a lot of oversight. It has to, typically, in my experience, a supervisor has to look at it. There's a threat assessment that needs to be completed. Something that's recommended here in Massachusetts is, once your affidavit is complete and it has that language in there, you specifically requesting a no-knock warrant, it goes to a search warrant team at the district attorney's office. Then after it gets kicked back and things may need to change, or language may need to change, it comes back to you. Then it has to go to another layer of scrutiny, which is a neutral body, which is a clerk, magistrate, or a judge that has to sign off on that warrant. So it's not that easy to get in Massachusetts. However, you can get it if you can articulate, based upon probable cause, if you can articulate a safety concern, the escape of the individual being sought, or the destruction of evidence. That's what you're going to need for a no-knock search warrant in the state of Massachusetts.
Very detailed explanation, but I got to jump in on one thing.
Yep.
Now, I think a lot of people, they hear probable cause and they think, well, that's what you need to arrest somebody on the street. But the process that you described is a lot more stringent than what it takes to arrest somebody on the street. Would you agree, disagree?
Yes, it's definitely more stringent, and like I said, because it has so many layers of scrutiny. You're going through multiple layers of eyes. Meaning, again, typically the supervisor reviews that affidavit. It goes to a search warrant team, and the magistrate or the judge has to also approve that. So there's several layers that are actually reading that affidavit. And it just because you feel that there's probable cause to believe that you have one of those concerns that I mentioned doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a no-knock search warrant in the state of Massachusetts. So it's not, you have to clearly explain in your affidavit prior. So it requires advance notice. You can't just walk into the courthouse and say, I'm going to hit 123 Main Street. I want a no-knock search warrant. They're going to look at you like you have two heads. You can't. That's not how it works in Massachusetts.
So you brought up three different circumstances which would trigger a no-knock warrant. So you talked about escapability.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about dangerousness. Usually that means, i.e., weapons, firearms, explosive things like that, right? And the third one was destruction of evidence, correct?
Correct.
If you knock and announce, for example, and someone hears, "Hey, police," next thing you know, we hear toilets flushing.
Right. And again, it's not that easy. So just because I feel like it's an intimate setting, and you have this general knowledge that the bedroom is close to the bathroom, that's not necessarily going to give you a no-knock search warrant. And so you have to be able to clearly explain in your affidavit of why you believe that there's going to be the destruction of evidence. So that could mean you had information from a source that says, listen, if I hear knocking at the door and I feel like it's the police, I got it ready to go right near the toilet. So all you need to do, so things like that, that's what's going to heighten your concern and lead you to believe that there may be the destruction of evidence.
So let me get Obed in here. Obed, talk to us a little bit about exigency. What is your definition of exigency, and tell us about your process in California, being that you are literally on the other edge of the country from where Michael and I work.
Yeah, so I can actually somewhat answer two questions at once. So everything that Mike just said is pretty consistent with, the state of California, generally speaking. And for the audience members or for those who weren't here before, but I mentioned this on the last time I was on your show, is unfortunately in policing, that stringentness that you might have in one state isn't necessarily required in another state. And what one department requires as far as like certain thresholds, the department next door doesn't have to abide by that. So you've got inconsistencies across the board. So you may have some expectations, right? So some people might think, hey, well, I live in Needham, Massachusetts, and I know that in Needham, this is what we do and so on and so forth. That certain expectation that you have that every police department does the exact same thing or follows the same road, unfortunately, that's not the case. So that's where you have a lot of these inconsistencies. And that's why, in one location, you can have a system that allows for something like this to happen where it may not happen in another jurisdiction. So we got to get that out in front. Not everybody's doing it the same way because, again, there is no uniformity across the country, coast to coast. So as it pertains to exigency, so let me try to give an example. So Mike gave a lot of detail out there. So let me try to paint a picture for you. If you got information that, I don't know, this guy, Obed Magny, sleeps right next in front of the front door and he's got a shotgun, and the second he hears something, he starts blasting, that could be grounds for a no-knock warrant where you got to show up unannounced, not giving anybody the chance to, retaliate and so on and so forth. But it's kind of like that probable cause plus. So not only do you need that probable cause where, you got to have a photo of the location, you've got to have the address number, you've got to have a Google Maps, all of these details, you got to have all of that and then some, just to even be able to apply for one of these no-knocks. So when we talk about exigency, we all know that the police can't enter your home, right? Unless what? They got a warrant, probation, parole, you give them permission. And the only time they can enter your home without your permission is, like I said, probation, parole, or they've got a warrant. So when you think about exigency, if somebody's running from me because I'm trying to detain them for whatever reason, and they run into a house, I'm kicking that door in and I'm going in after that person. Exigency, the law states that I can do that. Now, if somebody ran into somebody's house 2 weeks ago and I think they're in the house, well, there is no exigency. It's because you don't have that fresh pursuit. So I'm not going to kick in the door because I heard Dean Jenkins was up in here and he's wanted for stealing a whole bunch of VCRs. It's not going to work like that. So, when you think about the exigency, a no-knock warrant is kind of like that exigency for a search warrant. And it's very, very high. I mean, any warrant being served is already high risk in and of itself. But for a no-knock, that's like, this is really special. What are those special circumstances? If we're talking about somebody's trying to, if we talk about the information in the house is, they only have, I don't know, a half ounce of weed and they might throw it in the toilet. Ain't no judge signing no knock for that. I mean, let's just be real. Okay. But there's got to be, and again, every case is always going to be different. It's not like, well, every single time if somebody's like 2 feet from the door when they're asleep, it just depends on those circumstances. So again, it's got to be articulated very, very well. But again, not to belabor the point, it just depends on what jurisdiction you're in and what state you live in and what department you're in.
So the one thing that I can say again, I haven't done a ton of research as to what every state does for no-knock warrants, but I think the one consistent theme is it is not your standard level of probable cause. I think part of the problem too, gentlemen, is I think they should come up with a higher standard, a name for that standard. Because as you both articulated, it is not your run-of-the-mill probable cause where it's basically 51% you think somebody committed a crime. That's usually probable cause, more likely than not, right?
Right.
This is the highest possible level of probable cause, and the amount of proof that you have to lay in front of a judge to get them to sign off on one of these is something that people need to understand, that this is not a fly by the seat of my pants. Let me just slide this document across the desk to the judge and they're going to sign off on it. They're going to have a lot of questions, and then they're going to have questions about those questions, correct?
Mm-hmm. Right. Absolutely.
Right, that being said, I got two things for you. First of all, Obed, VCRs?
Hey, man, you know what? I'm thinking back to our college football days. That's our thing, VCRs. It just came out of nowhere.
I just want you to know, 1999 called, and they want their joke back, all right? So, secondly, from there, we have a fantastic question from Mike LaFleur. So Mike asked, if Breonna Taylor was a no-knock warrant, then why did some people say they heard the police announce themselves? What would they do that if they had a no-knock warrant? So Mike, talk about that. If you get a no-knock warrant, does that mean you're locked in? You got to kick the door in, or can you reassess? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So in law enforcement, when we people who have experience with search warrants, you know, they hear that doorway reappraisal. And what that means for folks who have no idea about law enforcement and search warrants and all of that stuff, a doorway reappraisal, all that means is if I have a no-knock warrant, a no-knock search warrant, which again has to hit 3 of those prongs in order in Massachusetts, in order for me to get that, in order for a judge or a magistrate to sign off on that, it has to hit those 3 prongs: safety, escape, or the destruction of evidence. So I bring up those 3 concerns. If one of those 3 concerns, let's say it's the destruction of evidence or safety. Let's go with safety. If I feel like there's a safety concern and that safety concern that I articulated in that affidavit is no longer present, is no longer relevant, I no longer have a no-knock search warrant. Even though I was signed off, I got signed off for the no-knock. I have to reappraise the situation now. So if my concern has been addressed, has been eliminated, is no longer there, I no longer have a no-knock search warrant. I have a knock and announce search warrant. So, and it goes both ways. So if you have a routine search warrant, I don't like saying routine search warrant, but if you have a search warrant and it is a search warrant which requires you to knock and announce, police search warrant, that can change into a no-knock search warrant in Massachusetts if you meet one of those requirements. So even though it's not signed off by a judge, you can still turn that knock and announce search warrant into a no-knock search warrant if you have a safety concern. Let me just briefly explain what I mean. So if I have a knock and announce search warrant, and I'm going to the house, right? My team's going to the house. We're getting ready. The heart's beating. You're pumped up, right? The blood's flowing through your body. Like, yeah, here we go. And then somebody looks out the window. Guess what? What does that mean? That means you might have a safety concern. So that knock and announce search warrant can now turn into a no-knock search warrant, meaning they already know you're coming. So if they already know you're coming, I mean, it's reasonable to believe that you may have a safety concern or the escape of someone, the person being sought may escape, or the destruction of evidence. It's reasonable to believe that. So that can trigger and turn into a no-knock situation.
And if I can just throw my 2 cents on there.
Please do. I was gonna ask you to do so. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. So, in addition to what Mike is saying, you have to remember, if you're making hey, police, we're at the door, we're knocking on the door, and then you start hearing, toilet flushing, and then you hear people say, go get there is no, we're going to wait 30, 45 seconds for you to okay, I wonder if they're going to comply. At that point, it's an officer safety issue. You don't know if they're reaching for weapons to start blasting through the front door. You don't know if there's crucial evidence that's being, tossed down the toilet or whatever those things are. So it's a huge officer safety issue. And obviously every officer wants to go home at the end of the day, and you're not going to take that chance. What's considered reasonable is somewhere between 20, 30 seconds. When you're knocking on the door and announcing yourself that you have a search warrant, right? And, depending on when it's being served, whether it's late at night, early in the morning, you've got to take into account it's the totality of the circumstances. So again, to Mike's point, if I'm announcing myself at the door and I'm hearing a lot of movement or people running around in the house, I'm not going to wait forever for somebody to come to open up the front door, because now again I'm thinking, well, Well, why would somebody, after I announce myself saying that I'm the police, not answer, run around all over the place, and then so on and so forth? Because people who are usually doing those type of things, they're probably up to no good. And I'm not going to wait to find out, if I'm a police officer, to find out what that negative thing is. So that's just something that, everybody always has in the back of their minds, because again, to Mike's point, there is no typical search warrant. It's just every situation is going to be different. Every one of them is high risk. Every one of them are dangerous. So, that's just something to just keep in mind. It's about 15 to 30 seconds is what's considered reasonable to announce yourself and give somebody ample time to open up the door. But if you're hearing people running around, I'm not saying that's what happened in this case. I'm just saying, just generally speaking, if you hear toilets flushing, people running, something's not right. Just something to think about.
Absolutely. So let me paint this picture for everybody who's watching. As somebody, we've all the three of us all have a decent amount of time on. I think between the three of us, we have over 50 years of law enforcement. It sounds crazy to say that, but it's when you have your time in, you have your time in. So let me paint this picture for those of you that aren't in law enforcement that are listening in. Think about the layout of your bedroom. Think about all the little things. Think about where you keep your jewelry. Think about where you keep all the things that you don't want, your little secrets, or you don't want anything to know about. Think about all those things. You know exactly where they are and where to access them, right? Well, the people that are coming into your home to execute a warrant of some type, whether it's an arrest warrant, a search warrant, if you're searching for a property, searching for a body, anything, think about the disadvantage that we are at going into that situation. That is why you have things like no-knock warrants. Because I guarantee you, those of you that are at home right now, think about where you keep your jewelry. How do I know if you get up and go for something that's where you're going? You just wanted to look at your pendant. How do I know that's not where you keep your weapons? Right? So that is why no-knock warrants exist. And that is why police officers are so restrictive about people's movement when we're inside of a home, because that is the ultimate away game. So, Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about that, about the safety and the heightened sense of alert you're on when you're on one of these warrants?
Yeah, just having some experience on a tactical team, you just, regardless of how much research you've done and how much time you've put into it in regards to surveillance or whatever the case may be, and you never know. Like Dean, I think you said it is when you're going into somebody else's domain. Your level of control in regards to what goes on in there, it's minimal until you've actually been able to secure the scene and control all the occupants inside. You never know what you're going to find when you get inside a home. So it's every situation that you go in, anytime you go into somebody's home and it relates to an investigation where you have a search warrant, the potential for the potential for it to go wrong. I mean, it's reasonable to believe that it's there, depending upon the type of search warrant you have. If it's violence, violent crime, you can sometimes you can kind of have an idea of what you may encounter when you actually get inside that location. So it's always unpredictable. Anytime you enter somebody else's house, it's always unpredictable, and it's always the unknown for law enforcement when we go inside those situations.
It's the truth. Obed, your response, please, sir.
I mean, Mike nailed it. At the end of the day, it's an officer safety issue. At the end of the day, you've got to look at the risk reward portion of it. When I say risk reward, I mean more of does the level of intervention match what it is that you're trying to accomplish? I think we can all agree it would be excessive if we were looking for a no-knock warrant because you might have, like I said, a half ounce of weed and there's no weapons in the house. I don't know that you need a SWAT team to break somebody's house in and, try to retrieve that level of evidence, right? Depending on what state you're in, of course, because in California, not so much. But it's just something that you got to think about. It's a high risk it's a high-risk situation, man. It's just, like Mike said, it's not normal for any agency to ask or request for a no-knock warrant. It's just not. So when you're doing that, it's got to be like really, really, like you're going after, a huge drug pin or syndicate you're trying to take down, and they're all staying in this one location. Like, it's got to be significant for you to even apply, let alone get it. So, no, I think Mike nailed everything right there.
Absolutely. One of the things that Mike does, and just to refresh everybody, Mike is a sergeant detective or detective sergeant, however you want to say it. And this is his domain, search warrants, investigations. So this is Mike's day to day with, for Obed and myself, it's kind of like Disney World, like, nice place to visit, but we don't necessarily always want to live there. So we're not doing this every day like Mike is, but we've both spent that time. Obed, I don't know if you've been on any tactical teams. I was on a warrant apprehension team, short time.
Did all that. Yep. And I had the pleasure of embarrassing myself on a search warrant. Now, mind you, the door is heavily reinforced, but I had the battering ram.
Oh, yeah.
It may have taken me more than 30 seconds in all of my power and strength just to get to a reinforced door.
But see that was the first mistake, because after 10 tries, you got to pass it off to the next person.
Yeah. I may have failed in that department. It may have been like 25, but
I have to believe that's an unwritten rule of some sort. And meanwhile, while you on your 25th swing, everybody's run out the back door, and first thing by the time you get in the house. Yeah. So it's good of you to make fun of that and be lighthearted about that.
Yeah.
So
true story. I'm not making that up.
I believe you. So let's talk about the powder keg that Stephen A. Smith talked about when he talked about the dangers of when you combine no-knock warrants, license to carry, and stand your ground. I think that this was bound to happen, or, I mean, you tell me. So we'll go to Mike first. Mike, what do you think?
No, he brings up a valid point, and for me anyway, me personally. This is my personal opinion. Is my thought process has changed over time. So I've had experience on tactical teams. I did undercover drug work. So I've been into situations where when you step back and you think a little deeper, sometimes I have to ask myself, was it really worth the risk? And I don't think that anyone's life is worth the risk. And again, my thought process has changed over time. So the way I think now is we always have an alternative. Do we always have to go running into a house? And depending upon the situation, sometimes we have to go into that house under certain situations, suited up. We have to do it. I get it. Totally understand. But a lot of times we don't have to do that. There are alternatives where the loss of life can be minimized on everybody's part, on the risk and safety of the officer as well as the occupants in the home. So my thought process over time, like I said, has shifted from running hard, running fast and going to hit the house so we don't lose evidence or whatever the case is, control bodies. Now it's shifted to, all right, let's try to figure out alternatives to where we don't have to get go into the house. We can get the person to come out, and that's we can use things like ruses and other things like that to really bring the person of interest to our domain, which is our control. So if we can control the situation better as far as law enforcement, get them out of their domain and into our world, I think we can minimize or reduce the safety issues for law enforcement as well as people inside the home.
All right, I love that answer. So I'm going to go to Obed. Obed, I want your response, and I also want you to tell us what is a ruse and have you ever used one?
So to Mike's first point, great explanation. And I'm not trying to toot the horn of those of us out here in California, but we're very, very, very good with that when it comes to our training. Unfortunately, that's not common across the board. In some places, some states, the culture is you go in, balls to the wall, pants on fire, just hair on fire. You got to go in and you got to solve the problem. And, in many cases, and I know that we didn't really get into it yet. I don't know if it's for this episode or for future episodes, but, the phrase that some of us like to use is lawful but awful. And in many cases,
talk to me about awful but awful. Explain that before you go.
I was trying to get to the other question. Now I feel like I'm at a White House press conference. You're going to ask me 2 questions.
Hey, that's what happens when you had to come out here and be all profound and whatnot. So
but
you got to own that. You got to own that.
I'm going to own it. I got you. No, but
what is lawful but awful?
Think about it. In many cases, and I don't know how many times you've watched videos of, people question whether or not the officer should have done this or should have done that. The thing is that if it's within, and again, I'm not saying I endorse this. I'm just saying you've got situations where officers are doing what they're trained to do. And when you watch it on camera, it looks ugly. It looks bad. You're like, how in the heck can anybody say this is legitimate, this, that, and the third? Well, if the law says you can do this and your policies and procedures dictate you do this, and then you do it, yeah, it's lawful, but is that the right thing to do? This is where we go back into transformational leadership. This is where we go about, we talk about emotional intelligence and de-escalation and, empathy and compassion. And sometimes, when you do those things, you're violating policies and so on and so forth. And you can be disciplined for that. And Lord knows how many officers have been disciplined for doing the right things, right? And it may go contrary to, policies or contrary to what the law says. And, sometimes their department's like, hey, we had a good outcome, but because of the way you went about it, you got to get this letter of reprimand or whatever that is. This is why, this narrative of where are the good cops? How come we don't hear from them? It's because when they're standing up and doing the right things, they get chopped down. Their careers are ended right then and there. So they can't promote, they can't go to special units, they can't do any of these things. And so what you do is disincentivize that officer from doing what they should be doing, right? Because when we talk about the role of law enforcement in society, it's to maintain public safety. And again, I know this is a whole another episode on what that's supposed to look like and everything, but if you discipline this one officer for doing the right things the right way, right? What the community expects, and it goes contrary to the lawful but awful, right? So now you've disincentivized this person for promoting, getting to special units and so on and so forth. The officer next door to your right or to your left is over here like, ugh. Y'all see what they did to Obed? Yeah, so, if I want to go somewhere, I'm going to make sure I follow procedure, the policy, the law, blah, 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 because I know I want to move and my career trajectory wants to go forward, all those kinds of things. And I'm telling you, that's a separate, again, there's like 15 different dissertation topics that we just went through right now. But unfortunately, because the law stipulates you can do something, doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it. You can use some discretion. You can use some compassion. It doesn't hurt to be empathetic. And we need more law enforcement agencies. We need more leaders in policing to endorse that, to say it's okay that it took you an extra 15 minutes to talk to somebody before you arrested them, as opposed to, well, you should have tackled him or her right away and should have, officer safety, this and that. It's like, hey, man, clearly, he had nothing in his pockets or in his hands. I don't need to do the pissing match, pardon my Spanish for anybody watching. I don't have to do that in every single circumstances. I can look at it from the totality and say, you know what? This is a nothing burger. I'm going to treat it as a nothing burger at the lowest level possible. I don't have to take it to the highest level.
So Obed, I got to jump in and I got to give Massachusetts some props here.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that, first of all, you stepped into my domain and you started doing kind of like a DT thing. So, I teach defensive tactics, and I teach another subject called integrating communication and tactics, which we call ICAT. And that's the whole premise of ICAT is you talk and you try to reason and you use space, time, cover, and distance for as long as practically possible to avoid the use of force. Right? That's something that I got to say. I think we see that in Massachusetts all the time, which is for the most part why I don't want to jinx this, but you don't see too many of these crazy things happening here in Massachusetts because I think that a lot of officers, even the crusty ones that act like they don't want to be in the classroom, even they have bought into this. And secondly, the use of force continuum, which is, for those of you watching, that is what dictates what the totality of the circumstances, which is when I arrive on a scene, all right, my perception of what's going on, the threat level, and then my reasonable response. Those three things equal the totality of the circumstances. So just because, like, for example, the use of force continuum says if someone pushes me, that I may be able to strike them, doesn't mean I should in all circumstances. Because if Obed, who is a workout fiend, or Mike, one of these CrossFit type guys, shoves me, I might have to strike them in order to calm them down. But if I have a 90-year-old, 100-pound woman, frail woman, and she pushes me, do I need to strike her? Like, yes, it's the same action, but in all reality, that's where you got to kind of use a little common sense. So the use of force continuum is not an I get to. It is not, well, if subject does A, I get to do B. If someone pulls a knife on me, guess what? I get to shoot them now. Like, yes, that is an option, but when there's other options available to you, you can try that. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because Mike LaFleur asked a question earlier on about the no-knock warrants. Just because I am granted a no-knock warrant doesn't mean I have, now I'm stuck and I got to kick the door in and not say, hey, the police are here.
Bingo.
It doesn't mean I have to do that.
Right.
And the fact that it's clear that people don't understand that, because people are saying, well, I don't understand why they would have knock and announced if they had a no-knock warrant. That's like saying, I don't understand why you didn't shoot somebody because they picked up a bat and they were 20 yards away from you. Like, yes, it could be deadly force, but the 20 yards between us might give me time to do something else. So that no-knock warrant being granted and them choosing to use a lower level of intrusion should not be vilified at all, regardless of how people feel about this outcome. So I just felt the need to expound upon that. So
you nailed it. That there's your quintessential lawful but awful. If a 90-year-old person is got a weapon in their hands, or let's say they have no weapons and they shove me, like you just said, yeah, technically I can go hands-on and arrest them and do what I need to do, right? Is that necessary though? Just because I can, do I have to do it?
Mike, I can tell you're chomping at the bit. Jump in. Water's fine.
No, I'm enjoying the dialogue between you two. I mean, I think I like what Obed said, lawful but awful, and then you just clarified a little bit about what that means. Yes, I can lawfully do it, but do I really need to do that? And that's where you get the bad taste in people's mouths. All right. And that's when it becomes difficult for people to digest some of the things that they see, is because, yes, we understand that and I'm just speaking in general terms. I'm not speaking in particular to any particular incident. I'm just, so when people see that and if we can see that, right, if we're going off this whole lawful but awful, if we can realize that, what do you think that the general public is saying? You know what I mean? So I think that we as law enforcement officers have to realize that a little better, and again, Obed said it perfectly: lawful but awful. Like, we have alternatives. We can do other things. Like, let's be reasonable about things, and especially in today's in where society wants policing to go. And guess what? You either, with everything in life, you either adapt or you die. That's what happens. You adapt or you die. And that's what we're trying to do in law enforcement is we're constantly trying to adapt to the changes in societies, and then what the community wants, what the community needs. And so we're trying to catch up. We're trying to adapt with the community needs and what the world needs right now. So, but Obed, you hit it on the head, and Dean, you explained that perfectly. Lawful but awful.
Yeah, and this is why, again, I know Dean's trying to move on, but that's why I'm such a proponent for evidence-based policing. Research what's effective, what works, so that we do the least amount of harm, not just for officer safety, but for the community at the same time. So, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, but I got to say, I've always believed in it, but I didn't know exactly what to call it. It's like you have a feel. It's like a gut feeling. Like I always believed in evidence-based policing, and I know we touched upon it in the academies, but I've never run into somebody that was, where you are with the level of your expertise with evidence-based policing, and again, maybe at the end, maybe on my Supply of the Wise site, if those of you are interested, I will post some links so you can learn more about evidence-based policing and why that seems to be the trend of the future for some of the free thinkers that are in law enforcement. So let me touch upon some of the comments here. So Fred Leland, who is one of the most well-known police trainers in Massachusetts, I believe that Fred has 30 plus years of law enforcement in. He is enjoying retirement, but he still teaches first line supervisor classes. He teaches transformational leadership type classes. So Fred is a guy, very well-read man. He's a good guy to know. So he says outstanding points on other alternatives, especially adaptability. And he goes, you train and then you trust them to do their jobs. So you train your people and you trust them to do their jobs. It seems so simple, but sometimes that's not always the case. And then D. Burgundy says, yes, I'd rather talk and calm it down than go hands-on if I have to. It's a win-win. So if you look at some of the comments, again, for those of you that aren't in law enforcement, you're just tuning in, you have a lot of people with law enforcement on, including the three of us, and we're all proponents of if I can talk somebody into handcuffs, or if I can maybe reason with somebody and maybe just give them a court date, like a summons, that's preferable. Like there are very few of us that go to work every day and we say, you know what, I feel like hurting somebody, so I can now maybe lose my house and I can get divorced or I can move and have to change my name. Not a lot of cops are in that mind space. So with that said, I'm going to go back to something that Mike said at the outset of the show when he talked about warriors to guardians. So the question I'm going to ask you both as we're winding down here is this. So warriors, guardians, can you be both? Or do you have to choose one or the other? So, Mike, since you brought it up, I'm going to go to you first.
We have to have a warrior spirit, but a guardian's mentality. And what I mean by a warrior spirit is you have to be willing to do to put yourself in harm's way to help others who can't, or who won't, or who can at that particular time. So you have to have a warrior spirit, but you have to have a guardian mentality. And I think that's very, very important to understand and realize, even more so today than ever, is we all want to be, we all have to be willing and able to do what we have to do to maintain a peaceful situation. And a lot of times we're putting ourselves in harm's way. But you also have to have that guardian mentality. So have that warrior spirit, be ready and willing, but have the warrior mentality.
Well said. Obed, I think I know what you're going to say, but go ahead and say it, man. Let the people know. What's your response to what Mike's just said?
I'm going to echo Mike's sentiments, and it's got to be that ace in the sleeve. You only need that warrior mentality when it's appropriate, when it's necessary. When you're going out to work every day, if you're a police officer and you're in the streets, you can't be on warrior status when you get out there. This isn't war. We're not in Iraq. This isn't Beirut. You know what I'm saying? You've got to have that mentality of, hey, I'm just another community member. Just like I'm no different than the postal worker, maybe the garbage person, somebody who works in the office of the clerk or something like that, or even your florist. I'm just another function that helps maintain the city stay in order. I am no better. I am no less than the next person who might be working in the tax office. But should there be a situation, you have an active shooter at a mall or in a school, should you have a situation where, somebody's got an axe and they're going after people, or maybe going after an officer or something like that, hell yeah, you're going to need that warrior mentality, and you're going to take care of business when you need to take care of business. But you're not going to go to the streets and say, "Hey, what's up, Mrs. Jones? You ready to fight? Let's do this right now." Because I'm going to take your business. Really? Is that no? So you can be both. This whole this whole idea of it's an either or, like I just don't get it. You know what I'm saying? It's like you can be both when it's appropriate. You know what I'm saying? Dean and I used to live back in the day. You know what? There were some days where it's just high reps.
Once or twice.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? But there's some days when you're going to go hard in the paint. You know, when you're going to do some squats and you're going to go heavy. You're going to hear, ah! You know what I'm saying?
Because you have to at that particular time. Exactly. You have to at that particular time.
Exactly. You got to have both. It can't be you're too much on the extreme with the warrior mindset, because that I understand if you're at war, you know what I'm saying? You don't know where bullets are coming from. But if you're walking down the street, driving down the street, and you just maintaining trust and legitimacy with the community, it's got to be the guardian mindset. And I want to say one more thing, actually, specifically to you. Actually, I'm going to just put the both of you guys in this.
All right.
So Chuck Wexler, for those who don't know, is the president of the Police Executive Research Forum, PERF.
Off of PERF, right.
And, you know, he said something a couple weeks ago where he talked about we in policing, us in the leadership positions, maybe not necessarily us where we're at, but he's talking specifically about chiefs and command staffs and policing in general. And he overly emphasized the need, and this is where I'm specifically giving you props, Dean. He overemphasized the need for these conversations that we're having, like we have today, to be taking place at the command level, and to even have it recorded so that the members of the public can see thought processes, different ideas being, you know, thrown out there, why we come to the conclusions that we come to, or where do we struggle, where are our blind spots, and so on and so forth. By no stretch of the imagination are we even attempting to say, Dean, Mike, and myself know everything about everything that needs to be known about everything in policing, right? Like you said, yeah, it's Disney World for me, but I ain't sticking around when it comes to like search warrant stuff. I'm good on that. You know, I wouldn't even say Disney World. I'm like, oh, there's an Epcot Center, but I'm gonna keep going this way though, you know, because I'm good on that. You know what I'm saying? We all have a certain level of expertise. We all have a certain level of love for policing. It's no different than when you look at football. Everybody can't be a quarterback, but that doesn't mean your position is less important if you're an offensive guard or if you're a defensive tackle or defensive back. So props to you, Dean, because of course you are already ahead of this curve. A couple of us have already been ahead of this curve, but even at the highest level and in the most influential circles of policing, they're already asking for the supply the why type conversations. So I just want to make sure you knew that if you didn't. So Matt, props to you, sir.
Well, I appreciate that. And again, like this, this was just it was something that was in my head when I was finishing up my my master's degree. It was kind of like a why not thing. And then I remember that I had so many outstanding people like yourselves in my life that I could always lean on, and we can have these conversations. And quite frankly, I asked myself, what took me so long? What took me so long to pick up the phone and reach out to you and Mike, who I worked with, and I knew what he was all about for a long time. And you're right. More people need to have these conversations, but it's difficult for some people to put down their ego and maybe, you know, look beyond the stars and bars on their uniforms and realize that, you know, that a lot of people in different organizations have value. You just have to have the confidence in the wherewithal just to shut up and listen sometimes. So let me go to a couple comments real quick. So Dee Burgundy, who's a veteran police officer, I know that she's somebody that not just a police officer. She is somebody that was new when I was already on a job, and she has come a long way and she's put her time in. So she is very big into de-escalation, and she says, be approachable, be able to switch it on when needed. All right. So that speaks to what you were saying. A very lovely lady that I'm kind of familiar with named Heidi. She says, do you think that most officers already have a warrior spirit and a guardian mentality, or is this potentially a shift for departments and police officers? So really quick, in about 90 seconds or less, let's see if we can address that. I'll go to Obed, then I'll go to Mike, and then I'll give my final thoughts. Obed, 90 seconds or less.
Yeah, easy. It's a cultural thing. In the institution of policing, that's what's valued. And if you don't believe me, just look at the training curriculum for any police department in any department in the USA. you almost see 0 to none when it comes to, and when I say 0 to none, I mean almost nil, at best maybe 4 hours worth of de-escalation training, soft skills training, all of these things. And then you flip that on its side, and then you compare that to the Fortune 500 companies where it's mandatory training, not just from the beginning, but throughout your career or throughout your time during a police organization. So if you talk about putting your money where your mouth is, we need to put more money into this type of training in policing. End of discussion, period, full stop.
Well said. Mike, floor's yours, brother. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think I think that we all have this, law enforcement. A lot of us have this, this warrior mentality, because that's kind of how that keeps us. A lot of us feel like that keeps us alive. It keeps us safe. It keeps our guard up, and it's important. I don't want to lessen. I don't want to minimize the importance of not letting your guard down, but we don't always have to have our guards up in every single situation. And I think that and to go into that guardianship mentality is to kind of humanize ourselves a little bit, be approachable. Don't call me officer, call me Mike. So I think if you make them feel like you are part of the community that you serve, and that you genuinely care, then I think people would be a lot more receptive in regards to the atmosphere that we're in right now. So to answer your question, Heidi, I don't think there's not enough of us that have that guardian mentality. A lot of us don't know how to switch back and forth when we need to do it, and they kind of stay transitioned into that warrior mentality, which is not healthy for a lot of the communities right now.
All right, great point. So I'm going to try to do this in about 45 seconds. Based on my experience, I think that what we're seeing now with a lot of the young folks that are coming on this job is they actually have the guardianship mentality, and they might not have enough of the warrior mentality. And what I mean by that is when I train people in defensive tactics, I'm seeing people, and I'm not saying that you got to go out there and you got to be a brawler to do this job, but it is common now that some of these young people have never been in a physical altercation with somebody that didn't share their last name. You know what I mean? Like, as you both know, like fighting with a sibling who for the most part is only going to go so far is not the same as fighting and rolling around with somebody who's on their third strike.
Right.
So
yep.
I'm seeing polar opposites. I'm seeing a lot of cerebral people. And again, we work in Massachusetts, which is probably one of the last states that really doesn't have to go looking for cops. Like, it's not like the pool's not where it used to be, but we still can fill our spots, and we don't have to go to other states to get people to come and take our jobs, like you are in California, Obed. So, I'm seeing a lot of like college, like cerebral type people taking this job that maybe overestimate the power of being in uniform and realize that sometimes at some point in your life, you're going to have to put your money where your mouth is, and someone's just not going to do what you say because you're dressed in such a way. So,
yep.
I'm seeing a little more of that, but I think that, like what both of you said, you got to be able to do both. And that's something that comes easy to the three of us, but it might not come easy to everybody, because it's not easy to read the room. It's not easy to be able to assess a situation in a matter of seconds and come up with a viable plan. That's not something that everybody can do.
Right.
So, and there's only so much time and so much money to go around for training. But again, that's another conversation for another day.
Wait, let me just say this to your point. All of that is emotional intelligence at Magny Leadership. That's what we train. It's all evidence-based. We know it's effective. If that's something you're interested in, I'll let your boy.
And like I said, Mike, Obed, get me some links. I'm going to post them on the Supply the Why page. And I'm going to help you guys get your word out there and get your message out there, because what you're doing is great work, and we need so much more of it. So,
and thank you, Dean, for, again, I don't know how an hour went by that fast. I feel like I've just been sitting here for 2 minutes.
We're at the bottom of the hour, and probably the best football game of the year is about to kick off in a matter of seconds. So with that being said, thank you, Obed. Thank you, Mike. This has been a fantastic monthly meetup. I can't wait to the last Monday or Tuesday of next month so we can do it again.
Absolutely.
Until then, good night, and I want you both to be safe out there. Let's keep in touch, and we'll talk, and we'll get ready for the next one.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Good night, everybody.